Good evening. It's 5 o'clock on Tuesday, 6th of Feb, and after quite a long hiatus, welcome back, viewers and listeners, old and new, to What Comes Next Live. My guest this week is Julie Smith, who is all about confidence. And I'm very pleased that my dear friend and past guest on the show, Dr. Carrie Goucher, introduced us. And the main thing I know about Julie is that she has a book coming out in just on 2 weeks. So welcome back, and thank you for being my relaunch guest, Julie.
It's a pleasure. I'm feeling a slight pressure about being the first in the sort of new series, but I'm going to try and put that to one side.
Good. So, yeah, I mean, this is a free-flowing conversation. What comes next for you is quite probably, for the podcast audience, Julie has an immaculately curated Zoom background, which I'm guessing is her new book or multiple copies thereof.
It certainly is.
Let's start out with the Graham Norton sofa type plug as to, because it's not just why you're here, but just happens, we booked this ages ago, but happens to be well timed. So tell us a bit about the book, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, I probably should get shot by my publisher for just passing on the opportunity just for a moment. I just wanted to pick up on something you said as you introduced me, if that's okay, and then we'll kind of get to the book. The thing that I noticed was you talked about me being all about confidence, and it really struck me for two reasons. So one is, actually, I feel like I've got a bit of a thing going on that is I don't want to end up talking about the book so much that I pigeonhole myself as the person who blathers on about confidence, and that's what I do. So I've got a thing going on about my work being broader than that, about leadership. Confidence is part of leadership, I think, quite an important part, but it's absolutely not the whole. So that was one thing. And the other thing that I think really struck me about Julie is all about confidence is just the irony of the fact that I'm feeling really nervous right now, and the sort of the irony of the whole kind of meta process of writing a book about confidence and what that does to your own confidence, and how my kind of confidence or self-doubt has kind of come with me through that process. So yeah, that was just what I thought, gosh, that really strikes me from that introduction.
Oh, well, excellent. And my apology for just instinctively going with that, and also like just acknowledge you for coming straight back and saying, look, this is what hit me about it. Particularly the first one, not wanting to be pigeonholed. Because there's other things you do. Just I don't do show notes, so people have to listen. So often get it out of the way, either the beginning or the end. But so your business is, where would people find you online, Julie?
So my business is called Talent Sprout. There is a brand new website on its way at talentsprout.co.uk. And yeah, that talks about my coaching offer. So individuals, teams, organizations, but yeah.
So there's a lot that people can find out about you there, and of course they can talk to you, and they can listen to you talking now.
Indeed.
What's the next thing? So just talk away. You need to listen,
Yeah. So the next thing, it feels so apt, Tom, that you invited me to speak on the podcast, and that the title of it, the premise of it, and that I'm doing it today because I really have this sense of being on the, I was going to say precipice. I think that's interesting, quite Freudian. What does that mean in the way I'm thinking? But on the edge of something new. So I've got this real awareness of a phase coming to an end, which is the phase of creating a book, a phase which I've loved and I've learnt an enormous amount. And and that sort of phase being replaced by this next thing, which is it being out in the world and my words and my thinking being available for other people to read. And I think I'm just aware of both my kind of hopes and fears about that next bit, and the excitement that I feel like I've been practicing with this sort of new bit of my identity, that I am an author. Still doesn't quite feel like, it's still a bit strange to say that, and I feel that in a couple of weeks' time, when the book is officially published, that will become fully real, if that makes sense. So there's a bit of a sort of an identity growth. Yeah, something else that I'll be able to say that I do.
So in a couple of weeks' time, when it's been published, or maybe a couple of weeks after that, when you've done some events and some interviews, etc., what can you imagine it will feel like when you wake up one morning and you might have one of those moments where you go, it lands on you, oh, I'm an author. What might that feel like?
Yeah. Gosh. So the first word that popped into my head when you asked that question was proud, because I do feel enormously proud of myself for actually getting to this point. So there's a I've had a sort of I think a desire to write a book for years, just because I love books and I love writing, so it feels like a kind of sensible thing to do. But you also need an idea, and an idea that you want to live with in an intense way for a period of time to actually write the thing. So that came together kind of 12-ish months ago, and I do feel really proud to have gone from an intention to a thing that I can have 20 copies of behind me, and that I can feel good about, that is a book, which I haven't. You invited me to plug it, and I don't think I've actually said the name of it yet, so I will be in trouble with my publisher. So it's called Coach Yourself Confident, and I will have I feel proud that will be out in the world, and I'm very much looking forward to the moment that I can walk into a Waterstones and find it on the shelf and do a really cheesy selfie. That's going to be a big moment.
Excellent. Or maybe it becomes hopefully it becomes quite a big seller, and it's in airports or train stations, and when you go through there you can do the Neil Gaiman thing and sign it in random bookshops. He has a thing about doing that.
You never know.
So part of your multifaceted self is that you coach people around leadership.
Yes.
So I'm fascinated by the title of the book.
Yeah.
So, Coach Yourself. So tell us about Coach Yourself Confident.
So I guess there's probably a couple of ways to answer that. The first is that I've been really kind of struck by how many of the leaders who I've coached have wanted to work on their confidence. And sometimes that's like, it's the confidence as a sort of headline act, i.e. they come and they say, I want to feel more confident, please can you help me with that? And other times, actually much more frequently, we uncover a lack of confidence as the sort of underpinning issue. So they might say, I want to be, I've got this new role and I need to be more strategic. Can you help me make that transition? And actually what you uncover possibly quite quickly is that they're telling themselves something about their lack of strategic ability. Actually it's a doubt that's holding it back rather than a kind of capability. So I think that's part of it. I can feel good about the individuals who I personally coach and how I can support them. But that's quite limited, and actually the access to coaching is quite limited because it's pretty exclusive just because it's quite expensive. So I had this kind of idea that what if you could package up some of what's really helpful about having a coach into a book that is therefore it's much more accessible because it's
Mhm.
not hundreds of pounds an hour, and it is available 24/7, etc., etc. So there's something about it being a coaching offer.
Mm.
And then I guess the other way to answer that question is the idea that we all have confidence. It's just that it is easier or harder to access. And it's almost back to, kind of my belief as a coach, that individuals have what they need. They just sometimes need
Right.
help to reach it, to find it, to access it. And in this case, it's kind of this idea that you have your confidence. It just might be tricky to reach. And through the coach yourself, is in kind of practical terms, there's lots of activities in the book that are, some will work for some people, some will
Mhm.
work for others, but ways to help them to get even clearer about their own relationship with their self-doubt, with their confidence, and how they can feel confident more often.
Mm. So cool. So a whole bunch of tools they can self-coach with.
Yes.
Imagine
Yeah.
from your learnings and experience of having been coaching people for years.
Yeah. Yeah.
A reflection is a way in my language, a way you put that is that what's its source is something around confidence, whether they're going to be more strategic or stepping into a new role,
Yeah.
whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I was mentored by a person called Ed Percival for years, and passed away a number of years ago. And he had at that point been coaching in different forms for 50 years.
Wow.
And the longer he did it, the less he said. And the longer he did it, the simpler his advice became. So there is
Yeah.
the Da Vinci phrase that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And Ed's voice pops up in my head quite often.
Mm.
And listening to you, he distilled 50 years experience into 3 words: be more you.
That's
And
just fabulous, isn't it? Yeah.
and so how do I look at coaching? Like you, my thoughts around it, again in my words, a coaching mindset is the belief that the answers lie within the client to a very, very
Yeah.
large extent. So it's our job to listen deeply and to shine a light on that, and to believe in them and to acknowledge them.
Yes.
And ultimately, but philosophically for me, it's all about helping somebody be more themselves. I was literally in a conversation earlier today with somebody. I said, look, who's struggling with LinkedIn. And I said, well, you just put a very open personal post up there a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
My encouragement is just be completely authentic. The more you be out there,
Yeah.
the more people are going to like it. And I work with leaders, and the language I often use with them is how you show up.
Yes.
It's not about the words, it's about the energy, it's about the passion they have. And so I think it's very exciting. So to reflect one piece around this is sorry, I just was distracted by my technology in the background, so let me just recenter myself. No, by the way, we're still working, Julie. We are still going out live.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Glitches and all. Yeah.
A small glitch. So what I was coming to asking you was, I too have looked at writing a book. And I've also been asked to do TED Talks and stuff like this, but both of which take a lot of preparation, a lot of focus, a lot of dedication. It's a bit like being an entrepreneur. And whenever I've asked somebody to be like, why did you start your business? They often go, I couldn't not do it. They were like driven to do it. It's not about the rationality, it's about they had to. So I imagine to have the drive to go through the entire process of having 20 published books behind you, and again, congratulations. What was the passion and drive behind getting the idea out there?
God, that's actually a really good question. I'm not avoiding it, but I just want to say something might come to me. I want to say something in response to what you shared about your mentor, because it was just
Absolutely.
beautiful. it was really beautiful. There was so much that resonated. I love the idea of the more experienced as a coach, the less he said.
Mm.
I do think there's I have this idea that we could offer just kind of sending some sort of voice recorder to our clients, and they can record themselves for an hour and then listen to it back, and they would get an enormous amount of value that there's even without us being there. But anyway, it's not about what we say, it's about how the client is able to see their own thinking, and actually just listening to back to a recording would do that. The other thing I wanted to come back on was the be more you. I mean, that's just, it's beautiful, and it's beautiful in its simplicity. And I think there's a real thread of that in the book that's about part of how you find or access your confidence is giving yourself permission to be you, and not to avoid the very real temptation to sort of shape yourself somehow to please others, or to meet the expectations of others, or to fit a mold that you think is needed. So it just feels like that's a really, really profound idea, the be more you. And it's one of those things it's simple, but it's a life's work at the same time. It's not kind of easy to do.
I will prevent us from disappearing into coach speak too much, but it's very Byron Katie. So it's like, it's the work.
Yes, it is.
A well-known personal development author.
And worth looking up, which is really good. So you asked me, Tom, about the kind of passion and drive to write the book. I think that's really interesting. So I think there is interestingly, I'm definitely my own kind of confidence case study. And the reason I say that now is that I think some of the drive to write the book is probably a bit of a proving self, which is connects to a kind of a need to prove, and a degree of self-doubt, a lack of confidence. So I think there's something in it, actually. There's something enmeshed in the writing of the book that's about feeding what continues to be a sort of ongoing work on my own confidence. I think there's something that is about, I'm trying to find a way that doesn't sound really cliched, but that is in the territory of serving others or making a difference, or something around that I guess my hope is that it is genuinely useful to someone or something. That's my hope, and I know that I have been and can be genuinely useful to people as their coach, as their in-person coach. I'd really love the idea that a book can reach more people. I don't think it's going to be a big it's not going to be a big bestseller, and that's not the goal. I don't feel attached to that, but I do get really excited about the fact that I hope there will be people who read it who they're not reading it because they know me or they connect to me in some ways. They come across it and the idea speaks to them. The idea, so part of the subtitle is ditch the self-doubt tax. And I just think that idea perhaps speaks to people, the idea that there is a cost to a lack of confidence, that we could, if I could help some people to stop paying that, or to reduce the cost of their lack of confidence, that feels really, really good. Like, just really, good. It feels like good work to do.
I did look at your website and some of the things you've written and about yourself and what drives you around that. And it immediately occurs to me that, Dr. Carol Dweck's work around the book Mindset, around growth mindset, fixed mindset. And in a few minutes, you'll be an alumnus of the show. So somebody else who's been on it is my good friend, Chip Conley, and Chip is lovely at distilling thoughts. And he's part of the Modern Elder Academy curriculum is based around growth mindset. And the way he puts it is, when we have a fixed mindset, we're looking to prove. And when we have a growth mindset, we're looking to improve. But what I'd link to that from listening to you is that when we're, these are my thoughts, when we're coming from a place of ego, that's where the proving energy can come. So some of your introspection around that, is you're inquiring of yourself how much of that's there. And the second of two things you said was that it's very purposeful. And when you're coming from a place of intent or a sense of purpose or being of service, to me, when that's a true energy, that's completely absent of ego. All right.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting juxtaposition of inquiry you've got. Part of it's like, do I prove this to myself? And that's perhaps your own small self-doubt tax. But a bigger part that I'm picking up from you is you've got this, your drive, it's coming from a place of intent. It's like, this can help people. So again, acknowledge you for that. That's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think they intertwine actually. So, and maybe that's just that, when none of us are either growth mindset or fixed mindset. We're all a sort of the combination of the two in different ways and in different circumstances. But there's something about, one of those intertwining is I really do hope that it helps some people and that it lands really well with some people. And I know that it's not going to, that some people won't like it because that's reality. That's just reality. It's not going to be for everybody. And I am working on being okay with that. Like, I'm not okay with that right now. I would, really prefer that everyone thinks it's just brilliant. So there's that for me is there is a sort of there is an intertwining, and maybe there's a sort of lens of improve, which is at least I know that in myself, at least I'm aware of that, and I'm giving it a go to get to become more okay with it. So there's the other way improve spoke to me actually is I think the whole process has been a workout for my confidence. So it's been overall a sort of an improve. And I think also I can reflect on, in some ways the book's personal, not that it's not the Julie show. It's not kind of packed to my experience, but it is personal in the sense that I have diminished my own payment of the self-doubt tax over time. So I can reflect on an improvement. I can reflect on, and I can sort of inhabit the idea that absolutely it's possible to grow. It is possible to grow in confidence, in impact, in lots of other ways.
Well, you strike me as somebody who is, and it will be through a lot of self-work, is extremely self-aware. So when you and I were emailing a bit about confidence and you're going, gosh, this goes out live. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah. It's like, there's a stretch. The thought to me is always, I look at one of the things I do in studying human behavior is one of my areas I look at is elite athletics. And when athletes are about to start their event, whether it's a 100-meter sprinter or a swimmer or a squash player or a basketball player or whatever, you'll often find them acting in ways that might seem really unusual. And one of the things is they'll yawn.
Yes.
Just before the event, or just before they take the blocks or whatever, you might find them just yawning, really big yawn. And you might go, well, hang on a minute. If you're a football fan and the person's going on there, you're yawning, do they not care? Are they complacent? But physiologically, that's nervous energy. Okay. And if you're really aware of your responses towards nervousness, you can transmute that into something really positive. So rather than holding it and bottling up, you can release that energy. So actually, if an athlete's yawning, they're aware of it. They've been taught it. The sports psychologist or coaches says, look, how are you going to release your nerves? Usain Bolt used to do it by chatting away with people. Blocks. And other athletes will be slapping their thighs or whatever, and others do different things. But where you know their performance is going to be truly terrible is when they're not nervous.
Yes. You also make me think of the crossover between nerves and excitement. So
Yes.
I definitely feel a kind of nervous excitement is the best description I have at the moment of how I feel. And somebody actually, I posted about doing this podcast, as you posted about it's a bit scary. It's a scary thing, especially because it's live. And somebody commented, a colleague of mine, Lou, commented to say, remind me of the connection between nerves and excitement. And it was Simon Sinek talking about, you can train your body to interpret. It's the same sort of physical sensations, and you can interpret them as nerves and tell yourself you're nervous, or you can interpret them as excitement and tell yourself you're excited, and it can have a fundamentally different impact. And I've been sort of playing with that, and I think actually that was a very useful reminder. I think the other thing, and back at the start of the half hour, you might have felt as though I was sort of somehow correcting you in the introduction with I'm not all about confidence, but part of what that did for me actually is I find that if I'm feeling a bit nervous, actually it's best to just voice that. It's best to acknowledge it, get it out, put it out into the release, with whether it's a group, whether it's an individual, and that in itself helps to dissipate it. So there's something, I guess there's something about recognizing, knowing what that looks like for you and what helps to move beyond it.
That's a great Julie Smith tip. And I was absolutely fascinating. I loved the fact you responded that way, because you picked me up on something. You did it firmly and confidently. And I went, well, in every, my biggest influence in my thinking and philosophy is Viktor Frankl. So we always have a choice as to how we respond to any stimulus. So you took one choice, and my response was, my role here is to be a supportive host. I made what felt in that moment like an error, right? And I thought, to what level am I going to apologize for this? Because I don't want to shift the energy, right?
Yeah.
I will apologize, but I will firstly say, well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And so I took a learning from my instinct, and it was great. I mean, the biggest part of that was, it was like there was a confidence booster right away. To go complete sidebar for a minute, it's the, patriarchy runs pretty deep, right? And you're talking with a white male with all the privileges, and how easy is it in a meeting? Our mutual friend Carrie is, she's absolutely not all about meetings, but it's one of her massive passions. It's just, can we just do meetings better? And anybody who ever runs a meeting should be learning from Carrie, right? She literally has a PhD in meetings from Cambridge University.
She's brilliant.
But I know Carrie really well. And she can, and she talks about this quite historically. She'd quite easily just sit in the background in the meeting. And, she is somebody with a lot of energy. And so you can actually feel that energy, right? And what you did at the beginning was like, that's exactly what she would teach somebody to do. Like, speak up, say your piece. Don't wait till the end of the meeting. And I wish you hadn't introduced me that way all the time. It's like,
sure. But what you also bring up for me there, Tom, is there's this, what happens, I think, in a lot of meetings or a lot of interactions even, and it does connect to confidence, is this the amount of second guessing that can go on. So in that moment, there was a part of me that was thinking, I don't want to appear rude to you, to anybody else who listens. I don't want to make you feel bad in some way. I don't want to make you feel as though you've made a mistake, because it wasn't. And it just, so there's this amazing energy that gets unhelpfully tied up in kind of second guessing. And I think in a meeting situation, often then the moment is gone, it's past, and you sort of sit with perhaps some regret that you didn't voice it. So I think it's sometimes really interesting. This feels like sometimes in a coaching conversation where you can use a small moment and learn so much from it, and it almost represents something else that happens, or a pattern beyond that particular instance.
Well, if we were to consider that imagine it was a client and they come on for, like, I typically talk to my clients an hour a week on Zoom, wherever they
Yeah.
are. And what
Yeah.
so what's on your mind today? Once you've done the usual small talk, warm up or whatever, and they'll go, and it could have been, I was in a meeting the other day and somebody said something in the first 2 minutes and I really felt like I should have said something directly in response, and I never did. And I've been
Yeah.
thinking about it ever since.
Yes.
To which, as a coach, you just go, okay, let's talk about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing that strikes me about that is how that's an example of us carrying something for a number of days and continuing to sort of almost a sort of time travel it. Now we're talking about what comes next. We've done some kind of present moment stuff. That example with that person in a coaching session is unhelpfully ruminating perhaps about,
Yeah.
that was a thing that happened and I should have said something. I wish I'd said something and I didn't. And yeah, I guess the space with you is an opportunity to maybe make that a more helpful reflection. And what do you make of that, as opposed to, I feel bad about myself that I didn't speak up in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, I do look to keep these reasonably punchy to about half an hour.
Yes.
As you said, we did chat for a few minutes before. And I love that you came on five minutes too. Some guests, I will say, don't. But it's also a great way to warm up, because even at those few minutes, let you get a sense for who's the person I'm talking to. But if it was 15, 20 minutes, then you end up taken away from the conversation because you're kind of into it. But we did say, well, that's half hour's probably going to fly by. So I think it has for me.
It has for me. Yeah.
So what I do like to do is to let my guest have the closing words. So what thoughts do you have as we come to the close of our conversation?
I think actually my thoughts are back to the post that I did saying, I'm feeling a bit nervous looking ahead to the podcast. Here are some of the things that I think I'm going to do. What tips do you have? And, a number of people talked about reminding me that I can have a conversation, but I've been able to do that for a number of decades, and that's all it is. And this sort of idea of just engage in the conversation, be in relationship with Tom, who is in front of you, virtually in front of you, and forget about everybody else. And I think what I'm just reflecting on now as we come to the end is actually that was just really possible to do. And genuinely, the time has flown by, because when you're engaged and interested, that's what tends to happen. So thank you.
And thank you. It's been really cool. And I feel I could ramble on for ages, but we're just getting started. So maybe we can continue another time. But thank you very much on behalf of our podcast guests. It's been, I'm sure they will appreciate it. And now your live half an hour unedited will live on the internet forever, Julie.
Thanks for that, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and goodbye.
Bye.